She lifted the filthy dog cushion with 2 fingers, her face twisting in disgust as if even the air around it offended her. "This disgusting thing needs to go," my daughter-in-law sneered. "Along with that useless old dog." I lowered my gaze, letting my shoulders tremble just enough to look fragile. What she didn't know, what she couldn't imagine, was that buried beneath layers of fur, grime, and stuffing sat a fortune worth millions. And the second she tried to throw it away, she would seal her own fate. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and this is how an old woman everyone underestimated prepared the most precise revenge of her life." Outside, the winter wind battered the ocean-facing windows of my coastal estate, but inside my study, the fire crackled warmly. I sat on the rug beside my bulldog, Winston, old, half-blind, wheezing, and far smarter than anyone gave him credit for. He snorted happily as I scratched behind his ear. He smelled like dust, damp earth, and stubborn loyalty. In this house, he was the only soul I trusted. I carefully opened the seam of his worn-out dog bed using a small seam cutter. It was revolting: matted fur, stains, years of neglect. Perfect. My daughter-in-law Claire wouldn't touch it even if her life depended on it. From the pocket of my cardigan, I removed a thick envelope wrapped in protective plastic. Inside were bearer bonds issued over a century ago, unregistered, untraceable, and priceless. My late husband had believed in preparation over comfort. "Money you can't trace is money you can't steal," he used to say. He was right. I slid the bundle deep into the stuffing and resewed the seam with steady hands. "Guard this," I whispered to Winston, kissing his wrinkled head. He wagged his tail like he understood the weight of the task. That was when my son's voice cut through the room. "Mom!" I looked up to see Daniel standing in the doorway, holding a glass of expensive whiskey he hadn't paid for. His eyes were tired, frantic, the look of a man drowning in debts he pretended didn't exist. Claire followed behind him moments later, her pristine sweater clashing violently with the age and dignity of my home. She wrinkled her nose immediately. "That smell," she said sharply. "Daniel, I told you that dog can't stay." "I have allergies." Winston sneezed, slow and wet. "He belongs here," I said quietly. "You're the guests." Claire smiled, but her eyes didn't. They calculated, measured. For the first time, I saw it clearly. She wasn't here to help. She was here to take. And as I sat there, pretending to be weak while hiding a fortune under her nose, I realized something chilling. This wasn't going to be a family disagreement. This was going to be a war. And once someone decides you're powerless, they never see the blade you're hiding until it's too late. The first move in any quiet war is subtlety. You don't strike, you destabilize. Claire perfected that art within days. At first, it was small things. My reading glasses vanished, then reappeared inside the oven. The thermostat I distinctly remembered turning up was suddenly set to freezing. Clocks showed different times depending on the room, and keys migrated to places they had never belonged. Each mistake was gentle, plausible, just enough to make an elderly woman question herself. Confusion is a weapon when used patiently. One afternoon, I stood in the hallway staring at the grandfather clock. It read 3:12 a.m. Sunlight poured through the windows. Claire appeared at the top of the stairs, holding her phone vertically. The red recording light blinked. "Eleanor," she said sweetly, "why are you wandering around in your nightgown? It's almost 2 in the afternoon." I pointed at the clock. "It says it's night." She sighed theatrically and descended the stairs. Oh, honey, you broke that clock yesterday. Remember, you hit it with your cane because you said it was mocking you. I hadn't, but denial was useless now. Daniel stood behind her, half hidden, watching silently, not helping. Not stopping her, just observing like a man watching a fire he hoped would solve his problems. If I protested, I was aggressive. If I argued, I was delusional. If I cried, I was unstable. So I did the only smart thing. I complied. I must be mistaken, I whispered, lowering my eyes. Claire smiled at the phone. That night she brought me tea and pills, blue ones, bright, innocent-looking. Vitamins, she said, for memory. Daniel wouldn't meet my gaze. Just take them, Mom. I placed the pills on my tongue and swallowed theatrically, smiling politely as Claire watched my throat move. She didn't know I had learned years ago how to hide a pill under the tongue without swallowing it. A trick from a witness who survived poison by seconds. The moment she turned away, I spat them into my napkin. That was the night I began recording. A tiny voice recorder, small enough to hide, powerful enough to destroy lives, stayed taped beneath my sweater. Every whisper, every plan, every careless confession spoken when they thought I was fading. One evening in the kitchen, I heard Claire's voice drift down the hallway. She's getting worse, she said. Daniel laughed softly. Good. Makes this easier. We need control before New Year's, Claire continued. Once we have it, she's gone. Facility, cheap, quiet. Gone. I gripped the counter until my knuckles burned. They weren't trying to help me, they were erasing me. That night, Winston rested his head on my foot, warm and solid. I looked down at him and understood something vital. They believed I was slipping into darkness. What they didn't realize was that I was only pretending to be lost so I could watch them walk straight into the trap. And when people think you're powerless, they speak far too freely. By the second week, the house no longer felt like my home. It felt like a stage, and I was the lead actress in a role I never auditioned for. Claire tightened her control carefully. My meals were monitored. My sleep was assisted. My movements were observed like data points in an experiment. Every stumble was documented. Every pause was filmed. She wasn't just gaslighting me, she was building a case. One morning, I woke to the smell of gas, strong, sharp, unmistakable. I rushed into the kitchen and saw one burner slightly turned. My stomach dropped. I never left the stove on, never. 40 years of living alone had made me obsessive about it. Claire appeared seconds later, already holding her phone. "Oh no," she gasped. "Daniel, it happened again." Again, Daniel came running, his face pale. "Mom, this is dangerous." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him she'd done it, that I'd checked the knobs 3 times the night before, that this wasn't forgetfulness, it was attempted murder dressed as concern, but I didn't. I lowered my head and whispered, "I'm sorry." Claire's eyes gleamed. That night I heard them talking in the living room. They thought I was asleep. "She's ready," Claire said. "The doctor is coming tomorrow. He'll say what we need," Daniel asked. "He's being paid to," she replied casually. "Just keep her confused. I'm doubling her dosage tonight." The words hit harder than any slap. Doctor, dosage, paid. I pressed my palm against my chest, feeling the faint outline of the recorder beneath my sweater. It was running. The soup simmered on the stove. I didn't touch it. Instead, I let them believe I was slipping faster. I missed appointments. I repeated stories. I stared too long at walls. I played the part they were writing for me because the better I performed, the sloppier they became. Christmas Eve arrived quietly. No presents, no laughter, just 2 suitcases by the door. "Vacation," Daniel said too quickly. "A place where you can rest." Claire sipped champagne, already celebrating. Sunrise Haven, temporary for your own safety. That's when the knock came, not polite, authoritative. Two men in white uniforms stood at the door, not doctors. Transport? Eleanor Whitmore, one said. We're here for you. I stood up straight. This is my house, I said clearly. You have no right. For a split second, Daniel hesitated. Claire didn't. She walked to Winston's bed and nudged him with her heel. Hard, he yelped, struggling to stand. Old dogs don't last long in shelters, she said softly. Especially sick ones. Blackmail, I looked at Winston. Then at my son, who couldn't look back. Leave the dog, I said quietly. Promise me, Claire shrugged, if you cooperate. I walked out into the cold night. They thought they were throwing me away. They didn't realize they were transporting evidence. And the moment you threaten something innocent is the moment you reveal exactly who you are. Sunrise Haven sounded cheerful, like a place filled with morning light and second chances. In reality, it smelled like disinfectant and surrender. Silence ruled the halls, not peaceful silence, but the heavy kind weighed down by medication and resignation. For 3 days, I played my role perfectly. I ate bland food. I attended group activities. I shuffled instead of walking. I stared blankly at televisions I wasn't watching. When the nurses handed me pills, I smiled and complied. Time for your meds, Eleanor, Nurse Collins chirped, holding out a small paper cup. 2 blue pills, same shape, same color, same poison. I tipped them into my mouth, swallowed loudly, and smiled again. The moment her back turned, I wiped my lips with a napkin and slipped the pills into its fold. Sleight of hand isn't magic, it's observation, patience, and timing. Skills I had sharpened long before retirement. With each avoided dose, the fog lifted. I wasn't confused. I wasn't fading. I was collecting proof. On the 3rd afternoon, I wandered into the solarium, a glass-walled room overlooking a snow-covered garden. A maintenance worker mopped the floor quietly, his back turned. I tapped the glass 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. The mop stopped. He wrung it out slowly, then pushed the bucket closer. Wet floor, ma'am, he muttered. You're late, I said softly. He glanced up just enough for me to recognize the eyes beneath the cap. Sharp, familiar. Getting past medical power of attorney isn't easy, he replied. Arthur, my brother-in-law, former federal prosecutor. The one man Claire had never accounted for. They're selling the house tonight, I whispered. Cash buyer. Arthur's jaw tightened. Then we're running out of time. I slid the recorder onto the window ledge. Everything's on here, drugging, fraud. A conspiracy. He covered it instantly. This will bury them. Not yet, I said. If you move too soon, they call it a family dispute. He nodded grimly. What's the end game? The bonds, I said. They'll look everywhere. Except where they hate most. Arthur's brows lifted when I told him. You hid millions there, he asked. It was the only place she'd never touch. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Arthur stepped back, lifting the mop again. I'll get a warrant. Fast? For the dog, I added. Animal cruelty moves quicker than financial fraud. He smiled grimly. Of course it does. As he walked away, Nurse Collins appeared in the doorway. Who were you talking to? I turned, eyes wide and vacant. The birds, I whispered. I was telling them to leave before winter kills them. She rolled her eyes. Bingo starts in 5 minutes. I shuffled after her, head lowered. Winter was coming, and this time it wasn't for me. When everyone believes you're powerless, you become invisible, and invisibility is the most dangerous position of all. While I sat under fluorescent lights pretending to forget my own name, my house was being dismantled by desperation. Claire tore through rooms like a storm. Drawers were dumped, cushions slashed, floorboards pried loose. The elegance she once pretended to admire was reduced to debris scattered across hardwood floors. "Nothing," she hissed, kicking aside torn fabric. "There's nothing here." Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands, surrounded by empty bottles and panic. Maybe they don't exist. "Maybe she sold them years ago." "They exist," Claire snapped. "I saw the records. Millions don't evaporate." Her pacing slowed, then stopped. She remembered the library, the chair by the fire, me sewing, always sewing. Her eyes widened. "She hid them," Claire whispered. "Inside something." They rushed into the library. Winston growled as Claire approached. He placed his body over the faded dog bed like a shield. She reached for a fireplace poker, swinging it to scare him. Winston barked and scrambled away, joints stiff with age. Claire dropped to her knees and grabbed the bed. She gagged. "This thing is disgusting." It was heavier than it should have been. Her fingers traced the seams, uneven stitching, different thread. A smile spread across her face. "Get me scissors." The doorbell rang, not a polite ring, a command. Bang, bang, bang. Claire froze. "Don't answer it." Daniel peeked through the window. "It's the police." Panic exploded. "Hide it," Claire hissed. "Now." Daniel shoved the dog bed into the closet just as the door burst open. Two deputies stepped inside, snow swirling behind them. "We have a warrant under the Animal Welfare Act," one said. "Due to reported neglect and cruelty." Claire laughed nervously. "It's just a dog." "The warrant includes removal of the animal and its living environment," the deputy replied. Her smile collapsed. They opened the closet. The bed was bagged. "Sealed, removed." Claire watched millions leave her house wrapped in plastic and couldn't say a word without exposing herself. Later, she collapsed onto the couch, shaking. "They'll dump it. We can get it back." But it wasn't going to a dumpster. It was going into evidence. Arrogance blinds people to the simplest truth. Sometimes the thing you despise most is the thing that destroys you. 2 days later, the courtroom smelled of polished wood and quiet judgment. I sat in the witness chair with hunched shoulders and trembling hands, staring at the floor like a woman barely holding herself together. That's what they saw. That's what they needed to see. Claire sat confidently beside Daniel, dressed in cream and pearls, already wearing victory on her face. Her attorney leaned forward, voice smooth, rehearsed. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said gently, "do you understand why your son is requesting full control of your affairs today?" I twisted a tissue between my fingers until it tore. Because I get confused," I whispered. "The fog." He smiled and turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the witness admits cognitive decline. We request immediate conservatorship to protect the estate." The judge lifted his pen. "Does the defense wish to respond?" "I do," I said softly. The lawyer scoffed. "Your Honor, she's clearly not lucid." "I'll allow it," the judge said, curiosity edging his voice. I closed my eyes, then I straightened. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my purse and removed my reading glasses, the same heavy frames I wore for decades in court. The room shifted as I put them on. The fog vanished. When I spoke again, my voice carried weight. "Counselor," I said calmly, "you may want to advise your clients to invoke their right to remain silent." Claire's smile flickered. I continued, "Lying under oath is a felony, so is conspiracy. So is administering medication without consent." Her attorney stammered. Objection overruled, the judge said, leaning forward now. I reached into my purse and placed the recorder on the stand. This contains audio recordings verified this morning. I pressed play. Claire's voice filled the courtroom. He's paid, just keep her drugged. Daniel's voice followed. Once we have control, she's gone. The silence was suffocating. That's fabricated, Claire shouted, standing. Sit down, the judge barked. The doors at the back opened. Arthur walked in, calm, polished, unstoppable, carrying a sealed evidence bag. Inside it was the dog bed. Gasps rippled through the room as he cut it open and removed the plastic-wrapped bonds. Bearer bonds, Arthur said evenly, recovered during execution of an animal cruelty warrant. Daniel collapsed forward. Claire screamed. The judge didn't hesitate. Petition denied, arrest both parties. As cuffs clicked shut, Daniel looked at me, eyes pleading. Mom, please. I met his gaze without flinching. Today, I said quietly, I'm not your mother. I'm the consequence. The gavel fell, and just like that, the war was over. Justice doesn't raise its voice, but when it speaks, everything stops. The courtroom emptied slowly, as if no one wanted to be the first to break the spell. I remained seated long after the deputies dragged Claire and Daniel away, their protests echoing down the marble hallway like the last gasps of a collapsing lie. Arthur stood beside me, silent, respectful. He didn't rush me. He knew that some victories are heavy. Are you ready? He asked gently. I nodded and stood. My knees ached, but my spine was straight. As we walked out, people parted instinctively, eyes filled with a mixture of awe and unease. They had come expecting to witness the quiet erasure of an old woman. Instead, they had watched a reckoning. Outside, winter sunlight reflected off the courthouse steps. Cold air filled my lungs, sharp, clean, alive. For the first time in weeks, I breathed freely. The house felt different when I returned, not empty, cleansed. The walls no longer whispered doubt. The silence no longer pressed down. It waited. Winston waddled toward me, tail thumping against the floor, his eyes bright despite his age. I knelt and wrapped my arms around him, burying my face in his fur. You did good, I whispered. In the days that followed, the truth unraveled quickly. Accounts were frozen, charges multiplied, the doctor vanished behind lawyers. Claire's professional license was suspended pending investigation. Daniel's debts, every one of them, surfaced in open court like bloated corpses. People began calling, old colleagues, journalists, strangers. They all wanted to know how an elderly woman outmaneuvered everyone. The answer was simple. I watched, I waited, and I never underestimated silence. Weeks later, I visited Daniel in prison. He looked smaller behind the glass. Less certain, less entitled. I didn't think you'd go through with it, he said quietly. I didn't think you'd force me to, I replied. He swallowed hard. I was desperate. So was I said. The difference is, I didn't betray my family. I left him there with his regrets. Months passed. I used the recovered money to establish a legal fund for seniors targeted by their own families. Cases poured in, too many. Each one fueled me further. Pain, I learned, doesn't have to rot you from the inside. It can sharpen you. One evening, as I sat by the fire with Winston sleeping at my feet, I realized something profound. They had tried to erase me. Instead, they had reminded me exactly who I was. Sometimes the final victory isn't revenge, it's reclaiming yourself. People assume justice ends with a verdict. They're wrong. Justice is loud in court, but it's quiet afterward when the echoes fade and you're left alone with what victory actually costs. A year passed. The seasons changed around the estate the way they always had, but I had changed with them. The house no longer felt like a monument to the past. Light replaced shadows, heavy drapes were gone, replaced by soft linen curtains that let the sun in without asking permission. The silence wasn't oppressive anymore, it was peaceful. I spent my days working. The foundation grew faster than anyone expected. Files stacked neatly across my desk, cases of elderly men and women drained by children, caregivers, and trusted relatives. The patterns were always the same. Love weaponized, dependence exploited, fear monetized. And every time I won a case, I felt something stitch itself back together inside me. One afternoon, Arthur joined me in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, chopping vegetables with surgical precision. Winston lay nearby on his new orthopedic bed, snoring like a chainsaw. "You've created a monster," Arthur said, nodding toward the paperwork. "No," I replied, pouring 2 glasses of wine. "I corrected one," he smiled. Later that week, I visited Daniel. Prison ages people faster than time ever could. His face was thinner now, his confidence stripped down to something raw and uncomfortable. "They said my parole hearing is in a few years," he said quietly. "If you wrote a letter," I looked at him through the glass and felt the old ache rise. A mother's instinct doesn't die, it just learns restraint. "I won't," I said gently, his face crumpled. "Why?" "Because consequences are the only teachers you never forget," I replied, "and I already taught you too many lessons you ignored." I stood up before he could argue. "I will visit," I added. "I will make sure you're fed. But I won't lie for you, not ever again." Outside, the air was crisp and honest. I breathed deeply and felt no guilt. That night, back at home, I stitched a small square of plaid fabric onto Winston's new bed, a piece from the old one. Not for sentiment, for memory, a reminder that arrogance blinds, that cruelty reveals itself, that underestimating someone is often the last mistake you make. They thought age made me weak. They were wrong, age made me precise. And when someone survives betrayal and chooses purpose instead of bitterness, that's not the end of the story, it's the beginning of something far more dangerous. There is a peculiar freedom that comes after everything is taken and then returned. Not the reckless kind, the quiet, earned kind. The estate no longer felt like a battlefield, it felt like a sanctuary reclaimed by intention. Every room I redesigned carried purpose. Nothing remained untouched by choice. Even the scars were intentional reminders of what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. On quiet mornings, I walked the grounds with Winston, his pace slower now, his steps deliberate. He stopped often to sniff the air, to take in the world like it was still full of secrets. In many ways, he reminded me of myself. Survival changes you, not by hardening you, but by clarifying you. The foundation continued to grow, court victories piled up. Predatory families began backing down the moment they saw my name attached to a case. Fear, I discovered, works beautifully when directed at the right people. One evening, I received a letter from a woman in her 80s. Her son had tried to institutionalize her just as mine had. She wrote only 3 sentences. "You saved my life. They never expected me to fight back. Neither did I." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer, not as a trophy, but as fuel. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about interruption, about stopping harm before it becomes irreversible. Claire's trial concluded quietly. No dramatics, no speeches, just sentences handed down with cold precision. Her arrogance evaporated the moment the cell door closed behind her, Daniel wrote often. Long letters filled with apologies, justifications, self-pity. I read every one, I answered none. Forgiveness does not mean access. One night, as I sat by the fire, Winston lifted his head and looked at me with his one good eye. I smiled and scratched behind his ear. You kept the secret, I said softly. He thumped his tail. People still ask me how I did it, how I endured being betrayed by my own blood and walked away standing. The truth is simpler than they expect. I didn't survive because I was strong. I survived because I refused to disappear. When the world decided I was old, confused, and finished, I let it believe that lie long enough to expose the truth underneath everyone else. That's the danger of underestimating someone who has nothing left to lose. They stop playing defense. They start playing endings. And by the time you realize it, the verdict has already been written. Because the most powerful weapon in any war isn't anger, it's patience sharpened by purpose. People often ask me if I regret it, if in quiet moments I wish I had chosen forgiveness over consequence. If sending my own son to prison still haunts my sleep. The truth is, regret is a luxury reserved for people who were given better choices. I wasn't. I was given betrayal disguised as love. I was given poison wrapped in concern. I was given a slow, calculated plan designed to erase me while I was still breathing. And when faced with that reality, I chose the only option that allowed me to live with myself. I chose justice. The house is quiet now, but it's the good kind of quiet, the kind that hums instead of suffocates. Winston sleeps most of the day, his breathing steady, his loyalty unchanged. Every time I look at him, I'm reminded that faith doesn't always come from people. It comes from those who stay when they gain nothing. The foundation has become my legacy. Not money, not property, but protection. Every case we win feels like reclaiming a piece of dignity stolen from someone who was told they were too old, too slow, too confused to fight back. Age doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerous because you've seen what happens when you trust blindly. Daniel still writes, I still don't reply. That boundary is not cruelty. It's clarity. Love without accountability is how monsters are created, and I refuse to create another one. Claire is gone from my life entirely. No hatred, no obsession, just absence. And sometimes absence is the most complete form of closure. On cold evenings, I sit by the fire and think about how close I came to disappearing quietly. How easily this story could have ended with a locked door and a forgotten name. But it didn't, because I paid attention, because I waited, because I never mistook silence for weakness. If there's one lesson I leave behind, let it be this. Never assume the quiet person has surrendered. Never confuse politeness with compliance. And never underestimate someone who has already survived everything you're trying to do to them. I am not a victim. I am not a warning. I am the proof. Thank you for watching this story until the end. If it moved you, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support truly matters. And remember, justice may wait patiently, but it never forgets. Thanks for watching.